We're here in Tucson, Arizona at Medicine Man Gallery with owner Mark Sublette, who happens to be celebrating his 25th anniversary last night and today with a big reception. We're here today, Mark, to talk about something you know a lot about, Navajo rugs. I guess the first, and blankets. I guess the first thing to ask is tell us how do you discern quality or how do you evaluate rugs
Right,
yourself?
so I get this question all the time. In fact, I've done YouTube videos just to kind of express this so people will know. But the most important thing is when I look at a Navajo rug, there's five things that I always look at. So I look at size. The bigger the textile, the longer it took to make. Tightness of weave. It's a very tight weave that also takes a lot of time. So those are very important. Condition. Is it in great condition? Or does it have problems with stains or fading, those kind of things. And usually if it's a new rug, it's not going to have that, but in old rugs, it's very important. And then
Right.
fourth is age. So is it circa 1900? Is it 1870, 1860? Now it becomes very important in early blankets to get the correct date. And sometimes we even have to use spectrophotometry, which is where we take a little piece of the yarn and we send it out to find out exactly what type of dye is in it. Then we know how old it is. So those are the first four things. Those are very objective criteria. The last thing has to do with artistic merit. Now that's a very subjective thing, and that's really where it comes in from years of doing this to know what really is artistically different or unique. And those kind of textiles I can give a high premium to if it, let's say it has a pictorial element, maybe a truck or something very interesting in it, or it's very minimalistic but done very well.
Right.
So those kind of things are what we look. So five things every time. I look at every rug the same way for the last 25 years.
Wow. And talk about that last one a bit. You said the most subjective part. What
Mm-hmm.
kind of things are you looking for? Just designs you've never seen
Yeah, it's
before?
almost like art. It is art. You look to see if it just grabs you. Is it beautifully displayed compositionally? Are the design elements like finely done, or is it very simple? But even being simple, maybe the wools and the colors she's used have made a design that's very subtle. But if you look at it, you realize they're doing this on purpose. Also, things like I had mentioned, pictorial elements, things that are very unique and different, are always going to add value. So it is a little bit eye and the beholder, but I think after you've done it for a long period of time, you know. So if you said, I have 600 rugs here, but if you said, Mark, show me your top five, I wouldn't have a problem with finding them pretty quickly because those are going to be the ones that really stand out artistically as much as anything.
I see. And tell us a little bit about the history of some of the rugs and maybe just kind of generally about, the transition from blanket to rug and some of
Sure.
the different things that
So I can
people...
give you an hour lecture, but we
Yeah.
won't. We don't want to bore the people at home about it. But basically, you have different areas, what we call classic pieces. These are pieces that were done before Bosque Redondo, which when the Navajos were interned by the United States government in 1864 to 1865. So things before that are very early, very rare, and they're very valuable. So those are pre-1864
Okay.
primarily.
And those are the different
Those are the
phase.
classic pieces, and mainly at that time you had first and second phase pieces as well as serapes done.
Okay.
Then from about 1860 to 1870 you started doing third phase blankets. You also then move into more transitional, and that's what really transitional means, is after the Bosque and you start to get the trading posts that come in to the reservation, because now we have a reservation after 1868 it's set up. People like Lorenzo Hubble come in 1878 and set up their trading posts. The different trading posts start to set up. And at that point, blankets that were being made to be worn and then made to be maybe not as fine, more transitional time frame, now the traders are really encouraging the weavers to make rugs because you don't need blankets to wear when they're commercially available. And the Navajo or Dene are very industrious people. They're smart. And they realize, okay, well, we can, if they want rugs, we can do rugs. And then you go into the rug phase, which is really about 1900 on.
Okay.
Transitional time frame really is somewhere in the 1870s through about 1890s. So those are kind of the gross
Okay.
parameters of what you'd expect.
And then for the remainder, I guess, of the 21st century, it's just the rugs are created by kind of tied to the regional trading posts?
Yeah, they are to
Okay.
some extent. They really are. And so, Navajo weavings are still being made. There's some great weavers out there still making weavings. Those aren't being made so much as rugs now at this point. They're really more for wall hangings. People don't want to put them, on the floor, even though they could be. This is where they were made.
Right.
But the older rugs, were made for the floor. We use them on the floor here at Medicine Man Gallery. I have both. I have, rugs that you can put on the floor. I can show you great rugs you could use for another 100 years. Then I have more contemporary things that you might not want to, very expensive, that you want to put on the wall. And we have early blankets. And blankets were made to be worn, and those things would not be on the floor. You know, you want to put those on the wall and take care of them. They had a different purpose.
And those are the
earlier
more
things. Yeah, 90s and before, and then especially the classics time frame. Anything, pre-1860s is going to be very valuable. And these can run, huge amounts of money if it's an early piece. So something that's from the 1840s, let's say a first phase Chiefs blanket, can bring up to $2 million. Very rare, though. There might be 75 in existence,
that's it.
If even possible. Yeah, and a lot of them are in museums, so they're very rare and unusual. You can get a great blanket, a real blanket, something that, was made to be worn, but you can find something, at least here, we'll have something in $3,500, $4,500 up to, $15,000, and then as they get a little earlier, more fine, then those are going to go up precipitously from that point.
And when people come in, maybe they haven't started collecting and they want to get into Navajo rugs and textiles.
Right.
What do you tell them? Here you go.
Yeah, well, one of the things I would tell them from me is first go to my website, medicinemangallery.com.
Okay.
You can look at all the weavings. They're all on there. They're online with the prices and size. So you kind of get an idea of what really is available. Then I'd send them to my YouTube channel, which is Medicine Man Gallery channel, because then I give little lectures on all the different types of weavings and what you need to do, as far as collecting, what you want to look for. That gives them a great basis that they can go into any gallery anywhere that sells Navajo rugs, and they already kind of have an education of what they should be looking for and kind of what prices they should be paying.
Right.
So education's the key.
Yeah,
I'd much rather not sell somebody a rug until they really have gotten to read and learn and feel comfortable with what the price structure is for all these weavings.
Figure it all out.
You can. I mean, it's cost compare. I encourage that.
Right. And how about trends right now in like historic rugs? What are you seeing people looking for or asking about, or what?
I've never seen that part of the business go down. There
Really?
always are people are interested in Navajo textiles, both for just decorating their home to put on their floor or on their wall, but also as collectible pieces.
I see.
And if you look at any Architectural Digest magazine, any of the major ones, every issue, I think, as far back as you can go, you're going to find at least somewhere you'll see a Navajo weaving in one of the issues that's in the house.
Right.
So there's constantly an interest in these things, and you can't help but open up a magazine, you're going to see it, especially in yours too.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's quintessentially American.
It is.
Art form.
Yeah,
And
it's fantastic.
Kind of
Yeah.
been developed and.
Yep. And you'll see people, taking those designs and incorporating them into modern culture, whether it's Ralph Lauren and that kind of thing too.
Right.
They're beautiful designs. They're innate. When you look at the modern abstract expressionists and the people like Donald Judd, and you see the way they made their sculptures, a lot of this is really, I think, inspired by some of these early Navajo weavings, the simplicity of design. Yeah.
They were abstract before abstraction was
was
a thing, right?
They were. Yeah, there's a famous Pollock actually that's, in I think the MoMA in San Francisco Museum of Fine Arts, Modern Art, and the layout is of sand painting.
Really?
It is, and Pollock spent time there in Arizona, and he knew and seen sand paintings, and he would be the first one to tell you he was inspired by it. So. Yeah, they were the beginners.
Right.
Yeah.
And the influences there.
Yeah, and they're still making great stuff today.
Wow. And speaking of that, who are some of the weavers that you kind of contemporary art and textile artists that you enjoy?
Yeah, well, I think one of the greatest ones, unfortunately, she's passed away, is a lady named Daisy Tlagalchi. And she was a Two Gray Hills Totalino weaver.
Okay.
And she did some of the very finest weavings. She died in 1965, but she really did amazing works. Clara Sherman is another one from that area that really was amazing in what she could do. So,
and on, say for example, for those artists, are they authenticated that they're theirs? Is there ways?
Yeah, usually, I mean, those are because they're expensive. They came with a tag, even if they were an older rug, let's say from the 50s or 40s or 60s or 70s. Usually, somebody's going to spend quite a bit of money is going to keep the tag associated with it.
Right.
They also have a very distinctive design, so if you look at a Daisy Tlagalchi, there's certain elements that she does that are associated with her weavings, and you go, yeah, that has to be Daisy's weavings. But you know, they're not signed. It's not like they're signed in the tapestry. Their
Right.
signature print is really the design elements
I
they
see.
use, the tightness of weave that they do, and
And if you see one, you know.
yeah,
If
for,
you,
if it's one of the great masters, I do. Yeah, and if I don't, I'll figure out who it is.
right.
Yeah.
Well, great. Well, maybe we can walk around and look at a couple
Sure.
pieces, and you can tell us about some of the
Yeah.
ones on there.
Yeah,
Does that work?
absolutely.
Okay.
Sure.
Cool.
Okay, so this is a Virginia deal, and Virginia was a fantastic weaver. This was her next to last weaving that she ever did on the loom. It took her 2 years to make this weaving. It has 9 different colors, and it's a very, very tight weaving. And the weaving is actually 80 wefts per the inch, so it's very tight. It's like a tapestry weaving. So this is a rare weaving, one of her masterpieces, one of her greatest masterpieces, and she was one of the best, if not, you know, for the 20th century, 21st century, she was probably the best.
Wow.
Virginia Deal, and she died just a couple of years ago. And you don't see things like this. This is all hand spun yarn, natural colors of the wool.
Natural pigment.
So this is really a spectacular piece and very, very rare. We're fortunate to be able to get this from the Totalina Trading Post, who had worked with Virginia for 2 years, to have this woven. And this is one of her masterpieces, and we felt it was important to have something like this.
Yeah. And when does that date back?
Just a couple of years ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well,
So
it really was made about 4 years ago.
Okay.
Because it was on the loom for 2 years. So it depends on what part of the weaving you're talking about.
And traditional designs.
Yes, traditional 2 Great Hills Totalina designs.
Okay.
Yeah. But if you can imagine somebody weaving this for
It's
2
incredible.
years, and 9 different colors that are in this. So it's very, very tight. So,
And-
you know, just the spinning time alone could have taken up to a year.
Really?
So yeah, just to get the wool prep. These were her sheep.
So the variety in color just comes from the different color of the sheep.
That's correct. So this is what's capable by weavers today. So no one should think this is a dead
No.
art form. Definitely not. And this is as fine as anything that was woven in the classic period, quite frankly.
Beautiful. Thank you.
And then another little piece. These are Daisy Tlagalchi's, and she's also a Totalina 2 Great Hills weaver. You can again see very, very fine. This was done in the 60s. It's incredible.
It's incredible.
Just
so
incredibly
super tight.
Yeah, very, very tight. All natural wool, natural weave. Again, there might be 50 of these out there in the world, because you can only weave so many as a weaver.
Right.
A lot of hers were big.
Wow.
So her hogan was burned down by lightning strike, and when that happened, she would only do smaller ones after that. She lost a big, huge one on the loom.
Oh.
A lot of hers would win first place every year at the Gallup Intertribal.
Okay.
Yeah, in fact, for 20 years in a row, she won first place. So she was really one of the most fantastic weavers. And one of the books that I wrote my murder mystery series, the second book, Kayenta Crossing, is built around a 2 Great Hills weaving, a Totalina weaving like this, by Daisy Tlagalchi.
Oh, really?
So the whole book has it as part of the plot.
Right.
Is, a weaving like this. So if you like those kind of things, you might find the Bloom series to be interesting, specifically that book, Kayenta Crossing.
And the weaving is interwoven
It
into
is.
the tail. Yeah, that's great.
It is indeed.
Definitely.
And then another weaving that we could just show you is this weaving. So here's, probably was done in the same region, very possibly, as these contemporary weavings were. This is pictorial, though, and it dates from around the turn of the century. And I love the fact that the little horses are, so naive. And these elements you would find at the Crystal Trading Post, which is very close to where Totalina 2 Great Hills are located. It's all natural wool, and it dates, again, right around turn of the century. So this is one of those pieces that we discussed where artistic merit really adds something fantastic. And, in fact, it does. You have almost this quilt pattern that you get the sensibilities of. And very possibly that was, an influence on this weaver. And undoubtedly this was a woman, as almost all these weavings were done by women weavers. Then you have something like this, which is a wonderful late classic blanket. So this dates from about the 1870s. All the reds in that are natural dyed.
So,
And so
cochineal
this,
or-
in this case, it is cochineal dye. It could also be lac. Lac would also be an early natural dye, but this is cochineal. And the weaver would take and each of these red yarn that you see, she would unravel, then respin it, or repair it in this case, and then weave the weaving. So she got trade cloth and then had to unspin or unpair, take apart the trade cloth, and then redo it to get the color. So an amazing amount of work. The blue is natural. That's an indigo dye, natural dye. And so the whole piece is a natural dyed, late classic blanket from the 1870s in perfect condition. And if you think that, these things weren't great in their time, you can see where maybe Ralph Lauren might have been inspired somewhat, right? I mean, these were shockingly beautiful and would be seen for miles and miles away. You'd be able to identify the weaver just from the back. And this is a wonderful late classic blanket dating from that time frame.
So it's
in perfect condition.
about
basically.
as classic as it gets.
So it is. Well, it's about a late classic as you can get.
Okay.
An earlier blanket would be even have a little bit different design element, broken into a little bit different design element. But yes, it's right there.
Wow. And the blue dye, where did that come from?
That's indigo. So that's a dye. That's a natural dye that they would use.
I see.
And they quit using that about the 1880s was when it stopped being used.
Oh, okay.
So it's a good way to date it. So if you see natural dyes like this, raveled yarn, and indigo dye, it's going to be probably 1870 or earlier. And again, the only real way to know for certain that this is a natural red is to do spectrophotometry, which we actually did on this case just to see. Yep.
And it tells you.
Helps tell it. Even though I could look at it,
Right.
I feel like I could identify it. But to know for sure, you can use objective criteria such as that.
Right. It's amazing that those are still available. That you can still come in and find something like that.
Yeah.
At a shop. Yeah.
Yeah, and this actually came out of an old family's collection, so they still exist. We're still looking for them out there. So if you have one, feel free to send me images if you want to sell it.
Great.
Thanks.
All right.
All right, Josh, thanks
Okay,
so
Mark,
much.
thank
Really
you.
enjoyed it.
Definitely.